This land is ours now. Filth like it gets wiped out with it. Dne Ror drove the words into Eli Brooks as he shoved her back, casual and careless, acting as if she wasn't worth the effort. His crew fanned out across the ranch in broad daylight, laughing, their boots chewing up the ground, rifles hanging loose while phones rose to capture her humiliation. "Stand there," he ordered, stepping into her space, his voice calm with ownership. "Don't move. Don't speak." Eli stood in faded jeans and work boots, her body still and her eyes lowered. She was counting men, reading the terrain, and measuring time. Calvin groaned behind her where they'd left him. Roar mistook her silence for submission. He had no idea he was giving orders to someone trained to wait and finish what others start. Before we continue, comment down below where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The setting sun painted long shadows across the ranch as Eli secured the heavy padlock on the tackroom door. The metal clicked with familiar certainty, a sound that usually brought comfort at the day's end. She watched Calvin in the nearby paddock, his silhouette moving steadily between the horses as he distributed the evening feed. "Almost done, Miss Brooks," Calvin called out, his voice carrying the warmth of honest work. "Just got 2 more to go." Eli nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Calvin had been with her for 3 years now, one of the few people she truly trusted. He understood the rhythm of the ranch and the importance of doing things right. The peace shattered as harsh white light flooded the pasture. Multiple engines roared, tires churning up grass and mud. Eli's muscles tensed as she counted. 4 trucks, maybe 15 men. They poured through her open gate like an invasion force, their yellow security jackets a mock uniform that fooled no one. Calvin straightened, his feed bucket forgotten. "Miss Brooks, stay calm," he said quietly, though Eli's eyes were already mapping the scene with military precision. 3 men per vehicle, various weapons poorly concealed under jackets, 2 filming with phones, and a leadership position emerging from the lead truck. Dne Ror stepped into the glare of the headlights, his smile sharp and cruel. Well, the famous Brooks Ranch," he gestured broadly, though I guess infamous might be more accurate these days. Calvin moved to stand between Eli and the approaching men. 2 of them immediately grabbed him, throwing him face first into the dirt. The impact drove a grunt from his chest. "Leave him alone," Eli said, keeping her voice level even as her mind calculated angles, distances, and cover positions. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Roar laughed, the sound echoing off the barn walls. "Private property? That's actually why we're here." His men spread out, some heading toward the barn, while others kicked over water troughs, sending precious water flooding across the packed earth. One man pulled out a can of spray paint, the rattle of the ball bearing inside, sounding like a snake's warning. The first letter he painted across the barn's wooden slats made Eli's jaw clench, but she forced her hands to stay loose at her sides. "See, we've been looking into your claim on this land," Roar continued, pulling a folded document from his jacket. "And there seemed to be some irregularities." Eli recognized her deed. The paper she kept secured in her home office. The violation of that space sent ice through her veins, but her expression remained neutral. "That's a legal deed, passed down through 3 generations." "Legal?" Roar made a show of examining the document. Funny thing about legal documents, they're only as good as the system that enforces them. He moved closer, invading her space. "And around here, we are the system." Calvin tried to push himself up, but a boot came down on his back, driving him back into the dirt. Blood trickled from his split lip. "You should teach your help better manners," Roar said, his eyes never leaving Eli's face. He was looking for fear, for the crack in her composure that would signal victory. Instead, Eli memorized details. The eagle patch on the lead vehicle's door, the truck's license plate partially obscured with mud but still readable, the distinctive scar on one man's neck, and a gang tattoo poorly hidden under another's collar. More crashes came from the direction of the storage shed. Feed bags hit the ground, their contents spilling across the dirt. The horses whinnied in distress, picking up on the violence in the air. "This is just a courtesy visit," Roar said, holding the deed up to the truck's headlights. A friendly reminder that things change. Property changes hands. That's just the natural order of things. He ripped the document in half, then into quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. Eli watched them fall, her breath steady and controlled. Combat breathing. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The same pattern she'd used behind a rifle scope, watching targets through crosshairs. "You have nice horses," Roar commented, glancing at the paddock. "Be a shame if something happened to them." Lots of accidents can happen on a ranch, especially one run by someone who clearly can't handle the responsibility. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eli said nothing, but her mind categorized and prioritized faces, vehicles, weapons, and weaknesses. No response. Roar stepped closer, tried to loom over her. "Most people have something to say when we pay them a visit." "I believe you've said enough for both of us," Eli replied, her voice carrying the kind of quiet that preceded storms. Roar's smile faltered for just a moment. Something in her tone, perhaps triggering a warning he couldn't quite place, unsettled him. But then the moment passed, and his arrogance returned full force. "Pack it up, boys," he called out. "I think we've made our point." He turned back to Eli. "We'll be seeing you again real soon." The men retreated to their vehicles, laughing and shoving each other like schoolyard bullies after a successful hunt. Engines roared to life. Headlights swung in wide arcs as they turned around, and the convoy rolled back through the gate they'd violated. Eli waited until the red taillights disappeared down the access road before moving to Calvin's side. She knelt beside him, taking in his injuries with careful eyes. Blood dripped steadily from his split lip, and he winced as he tried to sit up. "Stay with me," she whispered, supporting his shoulder. Her gaze lifted briefly to the dark tree line, where ancient oaks held secrets buried in their roots. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as Eli steered toward town, her movements precise despite the tension coursing through her body. Calvin sat slumped in the passenger seat, pressing a cloth to his bloodied face. Every bump in the road drew a sharp intake of breath from him. "Almost there," Eli said, her voice steady. The digital clock on the dashboard read 9:47 p.m. The streets were empty, most businesses already closed for the night. Only the clinic's fluorescent lights offered any welcome. Calvin tried to speak, but winced instead as fresh blood soaked through the cloth. Eli's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the dark leather. The clinic's parking lot was empty, except for Nurse Tessa Holloway's blue sedan. Eli helped Calvin from the truck, supporting his weight as they made their way to the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. Tessa looked up from her desk, her eyes widening at the sight of Calvin's injuries. "Oh my God, bring him back here." She quickly led them to an examination room, her professional demeanor taking over. "What happened?" "Gang of men attacked our ranch," Eli explained, helping Calvin onto the examination table. "Called themselves security. Beat him while he was down." Tessa's hands moved efficiently, cleaning Calvin's wounds with gentle precision. These bruises, they weren't just throwing punches, they were stomping. Her voice carried quiet outrage. Eli stepped into the hallway, her phone already at her ear. The sheriff's office rang 4 times before anyone answered. "Sheriff Larkin," she said, keeping her voice level. "There's been an attack at Brooks Ranch. My hand was assaulted, property damaged. I need to file a report." 20 minutes passed before Sheriff Wade Larkin finally arrived, 2 deputies trailing behind him. He walked into the clinic like he was responding to a noise complaint, not an assault. His eyes swept over Calvin's injuries with practiced disinterest. "So," Larkin drawled, pulling out a notepad he didn't bother writing in. "What did you do to provoke these men?" Eli stood straighter, her military bearing impossible to hide. "Nothing. They broke on a private property, vandalized my barn, destroyed feed and equipment, and attacked my employee." "Uh-huh." Larkin's tone dripped skepticism. "And you're sure you didn't say anything inflammatory?" In the waiting room, Calvin tried to explain what happened. "They just drove in like they owned the place. Started destroying everything." One of the deputies snickered, nudging his partner. Calvin's words faltered as both officers smirked openly at his account. Eli pulled out her phone, bringing up the photos she'd managed to take. I have their license plates, their vehicles, clear shots of several faces. Larkin barely glanced at the screen. Too blurry. Could be anyone's trucks around here. He handed the phone back with a dismissive gesture. Movement outside the clinic's windows drew Eli's attention. 3 large trucks idled across the street, their headlights illuminating the parking lot like spotlights on a stage. Dne Ror stepped out of the lead vehicle, adjusting his jacket as he crossed the street. The clinic doors opened. Ror entered with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. "Evening, Sheriff." His smile was all teeth. "Just wanted to check on everyone. Heard there was some excitement at the Brooks place." Eli watched him approach, her body still but alert, every muscle ready. "You know," Ror continued, "we're concerned about Ms. Brooks's aggressive behavior, making accusations, causing trouble." He shook his head in mock disappointment. "That's not how we do things here." Calvin pushed himself up from his chair, his face flushing with anger. "You're lying. You attacked us." One of Ror's men, who'd followed him in, stepped forward and drove his fist into Calvin's already injured ribs. The sucker punch would have dropped Calvin to the floor if Eli hadn't moved. Her reaction was pure muscle memory. 3 quick steps brought her within range. Her left hand caught the attacker's wrist mid-retreat, twisting it in a way that forced his body to follow or break. Her right foot swept his leg, driving him to his knees. The whole takedown lasted less than 2 seconds, silent, efficient, and brutally precise. The man gasped in pain, trapped in a joint lock that could snap his wrist with just a few pounds more pressure. Eli held him there, her face calm despite the fury in her eyes. Sheriff Larkin moved between them, but his back was to Roar's man. His hand rested meaningfully on his holstered weapon as he addressed Eli. "Let him go. Now." Eli released the hold, stepping back with controlled grace. The man scrambled away, cradling his wrist. Larkin's voice carried the full weight of his badge and his prejudice. "Next time you touch one of them, I'll arrest you." His eyes were cold. "That's not a warning. That's a promise." The moon hung high over Brooks Ranch as Eli stepped out of her truck near midnight. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she retrieved a heavy-duty flashlight and a weathered notebook from behind the seat. The night air carried the metallic scent of coming rain. Calvin was inside the house now, resting on her insistence after Tessa gave him painkillers and wrapped his ribs. His truck remained at the clinic. They'd get it tomorrow. Eli had driven them home in tense silence, her mind already cataloging what needed to be done. She clicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as she started her walk along the fence line. The beam caught the glint of severed wire first. Clean cuts, professional tools, not random vandalism. She documented each break with her phone, noting GPS coordinates in her notebook. The fence damage led her toward the south pasture. The beam swept across trampled grass, following deep tire tracks that had torn up the soil. A sickening smell drew her attention to a dark shape near the water trough. Her throat tightened as the light revealed one of her calves, its throat cut. The animal hadn't died quickly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, kneeling to check for shell casings or boot prints. Instead, she found cigarette butts, evidence they'd stood around watching it die. Her hand trembled slightly as she bagged them for evidence, marking the location. The main gate bore the worst message. They'd used accelerant to burn a crude symbol into the metal, a hangman's noose. The paint around it was bubbled and blackened. Eli photographed it from multiple angles, her military training guiding her documentation. Each image needed to be clear, time-stamped, and geotagged. Inside the house, she found Calvin awake on her couch despite the pain medication. His eyes were glassy, but fear kept him from real rest. "You should be sleeping," she said softly, setting down her notebook. "Can't." His voice was rough. "Keep seeing their faces. Keep feeling those boots." Eli nodded, understanding the phantom pain of remembered violence. She moved to her laptop, connecting her phone to upload the night's data. Steam rose from the untouched coffee mug on Eli's kitchen table, curling into the morning air like question marks. A lien notice lay flat beside her family's original deed, its crisp white paper an insult next to the aged parchment her great-grandfather had protected through decades of attempts to steal their land. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady despite the anger simmering beneath her skin. The bank's number was familiar. She'd been doing business there for 15 years. After 3 rings, Margaret Wheeler's voice came through, professional but cooler than usual. First National Bank. How may I help you? Margaret, it's Eli Brooks. I need to discuss my accounts and this lien notice. A pause. Papers shuffled. I'm sorry, Ms. Brooks, but your accounts are currently under review. I can't discuss any details at this time. Under review? For what reason? Eli kept her voice level controlled. I'm not at liberty to say. You'll receive notification by mail within 10 business days. The line went dead. Eli set the phone down carefully, too carefully, like handling a live grenade. Calvin limped into the kitchen, his face still mottled with bruises. He lowered himself into a chair, wincing. They're cutting off your money, aren't they? Looks that way. Eli pushed the coffee toward him. You need this more than I do. He wrapped his hands around the mug, but didn't drink. There's something I should have told you earlier. A few weeks back, I saw Roar meeting someone behind the feed store. Didn't think much of it then, but now. He shifted uncomfortably. The guy had a county ID badge. They were looking at maps. Eli nodded, adding this piece to the puzzle forming in her mind. Time to visit the county recorder. The drive into town felt different now. Every parked car, every face on the street could be watching, reporting back. Eli parked her truck in front of the old brick courthouse, straightened her jacket, and walked in like she belonged, because she did. The recorder's office smelled of dust and paper. A young clerk looked up from her computer, her smile faltering when she saw Eli. I need copies of all lien documents filed against Brooks Ranch in the past 30 days, Eli said, sliding her ID across the counter. Oh, the system's been slow today. The clerk's fingers hovered over her keyboard without typing. According to state statute 43729, you have to provide public records within 1 business day of request. Eli's voice remained pleasant but firm. I'm happy to wait while you pull them. The clerk's eyes widened slightly at the precise legal citation. She disappeared into the back room, returning minutes later with a thin folder. Eli reviewed each page methodically, her trained, eye-catching details others might miss. The notary stamp was slightly misaligned, a fake. 3 signatures showed subtle differences from known samples. She paid for copies without comment, tucking them into her leather portfolio. The morning sun had grown harsh when she stepped outside. She was halfway to her truck when 2 men peeled away from the shadow of pickup. She recognized them from last night, the ones who'd held Calvin down. Well, if it isn't the ambitious rancher, the taller one drawled, positioning himself between Eli and her driver's door. Causing more trouble. Just accessing public records, Eli said, keeping her voice steady as she slipped her hand into her pocket, activating her phone's recording app. Like any citizen. Citizen. The shorter one sneered. You people always want special treatment. Always pushing where you don't belong. My family's been here for 4 generations. Eli let a slight tremor enter her voice, playing into their expectations while documenting every word. The taller one stepped closer, shoving her shoulder hard. Maybe it's time for progress. Time for the right kind of people to develop this land properly. You should be grateful we're being so professional about this, his partner added with an ugly smile. Things could get much worse for stubborn folks who don't know their place. Eli clutched her portfolio to her chest, making herself smaller while her phone captured all. They eventually tired of their game, swaggering away with the confidence of men who thought they'd won. Back at the ranch, Eli cleared her dining room wall. She pinned up a large corkboard, then began constructing a timeline. String connected photos to documents, names linked to shell companies, license plate numbers matched to registered owners. Hours passed as she built a web of evidence, her military training turning chaos into order. The sun had set by the time she finished. Calvin brought her a sandwich she didn't eat, watching her work with worried eyes. The night was quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no distant coyotes. The crack of a rifle shot shattered that silence. The barn's metal roof rang with impact, the sound echoing across the dark pasture. A warning shot, precisely placed, close enough to hear, far enough to deny intent. Eli stood at her window, still as a statue, watching headlights fade into the distance. On her timeline board, a new note joined the others. First shots fired. 9:47 p.m. The grass bent silently beneath Eli's boots as she walked toward the ancient oak tree, its branches stark against the pre-dawn sky. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Baby girl, sometimes you got to hide what matters until the right time comes. The oak had been their special place. 3 generations of Brooks women had sought its shelter, shared secrets beneath its spreading limbs. Eli pulled a compact, military shovel from her backpack. Her movements were precise and methodical as she began to dig exactly 6 feet from the trunk on the eastern side. The soil was dark and rich here, holding decades of family history. The metallic clank of shovel against case sent a shiver through her arms. Eli dropped to her knees, clearing dirt with her hands until she could grip the handles of a long, waterproof rifle case. Beside it lay a smaller lockbox, both wrapped carefully in layers of oilcloth that had protected them from moisture and time. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unwrapped the rifle case, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. The smell of gun oil and desert sand crashed over her. Suddenly, she wasn't in Texas anymore. She was prone on a ridge in Afghanistan. The M40, a 5-sniper rifle steady against her shoulder. Wind speed 7 knots. Distance 247 meters. Her spotter's whispered calculations faded as she entered that space of perfect focus. One shot, one breath. The target moved exactly as predicted. Her finger squeezed. Through the scope, she watched a unit of Marines survive because of that single bullet. Eli blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. The rifle in the case was similar, but newer, a precision instrument she'd hoped never to need again. She checked it thoroughly, muscle memory guiding her hands through each step. Everything was perfectly maintained, ready. The lockbox contained her military records, some heavily redacted, others with charred edges from a fire that had accidentally destroyed certain files. Missions that officially never happened. Commendations that were quietly erased. Lives saved that no one could acknowledge. Her phone vibrated. Maya's name lit up the screen. "I got your email," Maya said without preamble. "The evidence is solid, but Eli, these people have serious backing. I'm seeing connections to state officials, corporate donors, old money families who think they own everything between Houston and Dallas. Can you file for an injunction?" Eli asked, replacing the documents carefully. "I'll start the paperwork today, but—" Maya paused. Roar's group has burned through 3 other law firms. They don't just fight dirty in court. They go after people's lives, families, careers. You don't have to take this on, Maya. Like hell I don't. Just be careful. Document everything. And Eli, don't let them provoke you into something they can use." As Eli ended the call, she heard Calvin's truck starting up near the house. She quickly reburied the rifle case and lockbox, marking the spot in ways only she would recognize. This wasn't about revenge. She'd seen enough killing to last several lifetimes. This was about survival, about truth, about standing ground that belonged to her family through generations of struggle. She was halfway back to the house when Calvin's truck came tearing down the drive, gravel spraying. He hit the brakes hard, jumping out with something clutched in his shaking hand. Eli's heart clenched. In his palm lay a small silver charm shaped like a noose. The metal gleamed dully in the growing dawn light. "Found it hanging from my mirror," Calvin said, his voice rough. "They want us scared, Eli. Want us running." Eli took the charm, studying it with cold precision. The craftsmanship was custom, expensive, not some quick intimidation job. This was planned, meant to say, "We have money. We have time. We can reach you anywhere. You don't have to stay," she told Calvin quietly. "This isn't your fight." Like hell it's not. He straightened despite his lingering injuries. "This is my home, too. Been working this land since I was 16. Not letting some rich bastards run me off with their dollar store horror movie props." The sun was cresting the ridge now, painting the pastures in shades of gold and shadow. Eli walked onto her porch, scanning the tree line with eyes trained to spot the smallest movement. The weight of the buried rifle pressed on her thoughts, not as a temptation, but as a reminder that she had options they didn't know about. Miles away, dust rose from vehicles moving along the county road. Probably just normal ranch traffic, but her instincts noted direction, speed, and pattern. Always watching, always calculating like she'd been trained. Calvin joined her on the porch, the noose charm now lying in a plastic evidence bag. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the dawn paint their world in light and shadow. They raided the wrong ranch, Eli said softly, her voice carrying no further than the weathered boards beneath their feet. The county meeting room buzzed with artificial light and whispered judgments. Eli adjusted her blazer, pressed crisp despite the morning's fence repairs, and walked down the center aisle with Calvin at her shoulder. Camera equipment crowded one corner where Gordon Pike's crew filmed, their lenses following her like predators tracking prey. Dne Ror occupied a front row seat like it was a throne, his custom boots crossed at the ankles, his smile sharp as a knife. His security team filled the seats behind him, all wearing matching polo shirts with their company logo. They looked more like a gang dressed for court than actual professionals. "Folks, let's maintain order," Gordon Pike announced into his microphone, playing ringmaster. His radio-perfect voice dripped fake concern. "We're here to address serious allegations about land development practices in our community. Miss Brooks, you have the floor." Briefly, Eli placed her evidence folder on the podium, spine straight, face composed. The same stance that had steadied her rifle on 1,000 missions now kept her voice level as she began presenting her documentation. "On Tuesday night, armed men invaded my property without—" "Invaded?" Pike interrupted, eyebrows raised. "That's quite inflammatory language, isn't it? I believe they were conducting a routine security inspection. They assaulted my employee and caused thousands in property damage. I have photos. Photos that could be from anywhere, anytime." Pike cut in again. "Sheriff Larkin, you responded to Miss Brooks's complaint that night. What did you observe?" Sheriff Larkin stood, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Ms. Brooks has a history of confrontational behavior. When my deputies arrived, she was the one acting aggressive." Roar's men nodded like puppets on strings. Someone in back coughed, "Militant, just loud enough to carry." "That's a lie," Calvin said, stepping forward. "They beat me while he watched. I got medical records." Laughter rippled through the room. Pike smiled indulgently. "Sir, please, let's keep this professional." "Professional?" Calvin's voice rose. "You want professional? How about we talk about that forged lien?" Now, Pike soothed. "Let's not throw around accusations without proof." "I have proof right here," Eli said, pulling out the notarized documents. "The signature dates don't match county records. The notary stamp is Miss Brooks." Pike interrupted again. "Perhaps you're confused about standard legal procedures. Mr. Ror, would you care to address these creative interpretations?" Ror stood slowly, straightening his tailored shirt. "I understand Ms. Brooks is upset about progress coming to her neighborhood. Change is hard, but these desperate attempts to paint legitimate business as some kind of conspiracy, it's sad, really, maybe even dangerous." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Eli kept her face neutral as her training kicked in, mapping exits, noting which spectators were armed, calculating angles of attack. Not to fight, but because knowledge was power, and right now, knowledge was all she had. "The lien is fraudulent," she stated flatly. "I have documentation from—" "I think we've heard enough accusations," Pike announced. "Sheriff, anything to add?" Larkin shrugged. "Just that my office is monitoring the situation. We can't have people stirring up trouble with wild claims." The meeting dissolved into procedural dismissals. Eli gathered her papers with mechanical precision while Roar's men snickered. Outside, a deputy shouldered past Calvin, knocking Eli's evidence folder from her hands. Papers scattered across the wet pavement. "Oops," the deputy said, grinding his heel on a photo as he walked away. "Guess you should be more careful with your proof." They drove home in silence. Calvin's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Eli watched the road with sniper's eyes, noting vehicles, memorizing plates, marking potential observation points. Back at the ranch, she didn't waste time on anger. She unpacked surveillance cameras from a locked cabinet, gear she'd hoped never to need again. Each unit was positioned with tactical precision, covering the fence lines, the barn, and approaches to the house. She marked ranges in her mind: 200 yards to the oak tree, 150 to the cattle guard, 75 to the tool shed. Inside, she set up a laptop to record Pike's nightly broadcast. His voice filled the kitchen as she logged sponsors, timestamps, and specific lies. Concerned citizens report increasing hostility from certain property owners refusing to participate in community improvement. Eli noted the company's advertising during his segments: names, dates, dollar amounts. Intelligence gathering was like breathing to her, automatic, essential, and silent. The sun settled toward the horizon as she finished her preparations. She mapped every blind spot, every potential cover, every angle of approach. Not for violence, for survival. Her phone buzzed. The motion sensor alert flashed red. Movement at the north fence line. The security feed showed 3 figures in masks working with bolt cutters. They moved with the confidence of men who thought they owned the night. Eli watched their progress through a laptop screen, her face illuminated by the cold blue glow. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't call the sheriff. She simply observed and recorded, gathering intelligence like she'd done in war zones across the world. The masked men cut through another section of fence, their movements casual, unhurried. They believed they were the hunters here. They were wrong. Eli crept through the tall grass, her movements fluid and silent. Years of combat training made stealth second nature. Her phone recorded video in one hand while the other remained free. The barn's shadow provided perfect cover as she tracked the intruder's progress. Moonlight glinted off their masks, cheap Halloween varieties that wouldn't fool any security camera. She recognized their builds. Roar's regular muscle, the ones who'd beaten Calvin. Their whispers carried across the quiet ranch. "Teach that uppity bitch a lesson," one growled. "Break some windows, maybe start a little fire," another added with a laugh. "Boss says make it hurt this time." Eli's jaw tightened, but her breathing remained steady. She positioned the new floodlights carefully, angled to blind anyone approaching the house. The siren she'd rigged from old ranch equipment was crude but effective, wired to a remote trigger in her pocket. They were 20 yards from the house when she pressed the button. Light exploded across the yard. The modified cattle siren wailed like a banshee. The men staggered, cursing as their night vision shattered, but instead of running, Calvin emerged from behind the barn, gripping a shovel with white-knuckled hands. His face showed fear, but his stance was pure defiance as he blocked the escape route. "Stop right there." Calvin's voice shook but held firm. The masked man didn't slow. He barreled into Calvin, knocking him sprawling. The shovel clattered away. Eli was already moving. Her boots barely seemed to touch the ground as she closed the distance. The fleeing attacker heard her coming, started to turn. She drove her shoulder into his kidney with controlled violence. The impact lifted him off his feet, expelled his breath in a whoosh. He crumpled, gasping. "Stay down," she commanded, her voice cold as gunmetal. He tried to crawl. She trapped his arm in a joint lock that made him yelp. "I said stay down." Calvin retrieved his shovel, his hand steadier now. "Got more zip ties?" Eli secured the third man, while Calvin helped drag all 3 into the floodlit yard. She positioned them carefully, facing the cameras she'd mounted that afternoon. Their masks had shifted in the struggle, revealing familiar faces. Roar's security team, just as she'd suspected. Red and blue lights strobed across the scene 15 minutes later. Sheriff Larkin stepped out of his cruiser, taking in the tableau with obvious displeasure. His deputies spread out, hands on their weapons. "What happened here?" Larkin demanded. "These men trespassed and attacked us," Eli stated flatly. "I have video evidence of the entire incident." "They assaulted me first," Calvin added. "We were defending ourselves." Larkin circled the zip-tied men, shaking his head. "Looks more like you ambushed these boys." "They had weapons," Eli said. "Check the pipe by the post." Check their pockets. I'll check whatever I decide to check. Larkin pulled out a pocket knife and sliced through the zip ties. The men scrambled up, rubbing their wrists. You're letting them go? Calvin's voice cracked with disbelief. Far as I can see, Ms. Brooks here attacked 3 men who might have been lost on a dark night. Larkin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Could be looking at assault charges. One of the freed men spat on the ground near Eli's boots. Another made a slashing motion across his throat. The third simply smiled, the same smug expression Roar always wore. Larkin stepped close to Eli, close enough she could smell stale coffee on his breath. His voice dropped to a whisper. One day you'll go too far. Morning sunlight streamed across Eli's kitchen table where fresh coffee steamed beside scattered documents and photos. Maya Kincaid set down her leather briefcase, her military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. She pulled out bandages and antiseptic, eyeing the bruises on Eli's knuckles from last night's fight. Let me see those hands, Maya said, her tone brooking no argument. I'm fine, Eli insisted, but held out her hands anyway. Marines, Maya muttered, cleaning the scrapes. Always trying to tough it out. She'd been JAG Corps long enough to know the type. Eli managed a small smile. Takes one to know one. Maya pulled out a compact scanner, sleek and professional. Show me everything. Every photo, every document, every scrap of paper they've touched. For the next hour, they built their case. Maya's scanner hummed, creating digital copies while she typed rapid notes on her laptop. She worked with methodical precision, organizing evidence into categories: property damage, physical assaults, forged documents, discriminatory practices. The lean is amateur hour, Maya said, examining the paperwork. Fake notary stamp, backdated signatures. They got sloppy. Sloppy but effective, Eli replied. Banks still frozen my accounts. Maya nodded grimly. I'm connecting you with Wallace Granger, civil rights attorney. Good track record. Careful man, but he gets results. Can we trust him? He's not the type to stick his neck out unnecessarily, but he's solid. Knows how to work within the system. They walked the property together, Maya insisting on photographing everything again. At the burn gate, she made Eli describe how it felt seeing the racist symbols carved there. At the vandalized barn, she documented not just the damage, but Eli's connection to the place. How her grandfather had built it, how she'd learned to ride there. Emotional impact matters, Maya explained. Courts need to see the human cost, not just dollar figures. In town, they parked across from the gas station that faced the ranch access road. The night of the raid, its security cameras would have caught everything. Owner's name is Jim Phelps, Maya said. Vietnam vet. Might be sympathetic. Inside, Phelps looked nervous, glancing repeatedly at the door. Gordon Pike was here yesterday, he muttered. Said there might be trouble if certain footage got out. Eli met his eyes. Mr. Phelps, I'm a Marine. 20 years service. What they're doing isn't right. I know that, he said quietly. But they got reach in this town. We can be discreet, Eli said, pulling out several hundred. No one needs to know where it came from. Phelps hesitated, then reached under the counter. The flash drive was small, unremarkable. Delete it after, please. Back in Maya's car, they reviewed the footage on her laptop. The timestamp showed Roar's convoy clearly, headlights blazing as they turned toward the ranch. But what made Eli's jaw clench was the patrol car idling in the shadows. Sheriff Larkin's unit watching the whole thing. Son of a bitch, Maya breathed. He knew, Eli said. He watched them come for me and did nothing. This is bigger than harassment, Maya said, copying the files. The sheriff's actively involved. We need to move fast. They spent the afternoon preparing emergency motions. Maya worked her contacts, calling in favors. By 6 p.m., she had a sympathetic judge willing to review their filing immediately. The evidence is strong, Maya said, hitting submit on the electronic filing. Clear pattern of harassment, documented damages, proof of official misconduct. We should hear something soon. Eli paced her kitchen, trying not to watch her phone. The sun was setting when it finally buzzed. A court notification. Temporary injunction granted, Maya read aloud. Roar and his men have to stay 500 yards from your property. No contact, No surveillance, no proxies. Eli's shoulders relaxed slightly. It wasn't victory, but it was something. A shield, however temporary. Then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The message was simple. Injunctions burn. Maya leaned forward, jaw set. Screenshot that. Document everything. They're getting desperate. Eli nodded, already saving the threat. Her combat instincts hadn't dulled. She could feel the situation escalating, moving toward inevitable confrontation. But for now, she had what she needed. Proof, allies, and a legal foothold. What's our next move? She asked. We press the advantage, Maya replied, pulling out more files. I've got tax records showing suspicious patterns in local property transfers. And there's something odd about Roar's company registration. Shell corporations, hidden ownership. They worked as darkness fell, building their case piece by piece. The injunction was just the beginning. The real fight for justice, for her land, for the truth, was still ahead. But for the first time since the raids began, Eli felt the momentum shifting. She had evidence of corruption now, proof that couldn't be ignored or explained away. Maya gathered her things to leave, pausing at the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start depositions. Make them answer for everything under oath. Eli nodded, watching her drive away. The night was quiet except for distant coyotes. Her land stretched dark and peaceful around her, generations of history in every acre. She wouldn't let them take it. Not with threats, not with lies, not with fire. The temporary injunction was just paper. But paper could tell the truth, expose lies, force justice. And as Eli Brooks had learned in war, sometimes the right papers in the right hands could be more powerful than bullets. The crack of splintering would jolted Eli awake. Her eyes snapped open to darkness. But something was wrong. A sickly sweet chemical smell filled her nose. Gasoline. Then came the soft whoosh of flames catching. She was moving before her mind fully processed it, military training kicking in. Boots on, phone in hand, gun in waistband. Through her bedroom window, orange light flickered against the barn's weathered walls. Fire raced up the boards like hungry fingers, accelerant feeding its spread. "Calvin!" she shouted, pounding on his door. "Fire! Get up!" He stumbled out, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ!" "Truck now!" She shoved the keys into his hand while dialing 911. "Start it up. We've got horses to save." The dispatcher's voice crackled as Eli sprinted to the mudroom, grabbing fire extinguishers. "Fire department is en route to Brooks Ranch. Tell them to hurry." Eli snapped. "It's accelerant-based, spreading fast, livestock in danger." Heat slapped her face as she ran toward the barn. The south wall was fully involved now, flames reaching for the roof. Calvin pulled the truck around, headlights cutting through thick smoke. Eli attacked the fire near the main doors with short bursts from the extinguisher, creating a narrow path. "Stay low," she ordered Calvin as they pushed inside. The heat was crushing, smoke rolling along the ceiling. Horses screamed in their stalls, kicking walls in panic. Eli's throat burned with each breath. They worked fast, Eli cutting lead ropes while Calvin guided panicked animals toward the door. The first 3 horses bolted free, then 4 more. But the fire was winning, eating through old wood faster than they could work. A support beam groaned overhead. "That's it," Calvin shouted. "We gotta go." Eli turned to follow, then froze. Through the thickening smoke, a shadow moved near her office door. Not the jerky motion of flames, but purposeful, human. "Someone's in the tack room," she growled. Eli don't, but she was already moving, ducking under burning debris. Through the smoke, she glimpsed a figure stuffing papers into a bag. Her files, her evidence. Rage cut through her fear. "Hey," she shouted. The thief spun and ran. Eli burst out of the barn side door in pursuit, lungs burning. The figure was male, tall, dressed in dark clothes. He cut across the paddock, heading for the tree line. Eli gained ground with each stride. He must have heard her footsteps because he whirled suddenly, a crowbar swinging at head height. Eli's forearm came up instinctively, blocking the strike. Pain blazed through her arm, but she was already moving, Marine combat training taking over. Her knee drove up into his ribs with crushing force. He doubled over with a grunt. The bag hit the ground as he staggered back. Eli reached for him, but he kicked dirt in her face and sprinted away. She started to follow, then heard Calvin shouting her name. The barn's roof was fully engulfed now. Fire engine sirens wailed in the distance, too distant. When they finally arrived, the firefighters moved with bizarre lethargy. No urgency in their hoses, no hustle in their steps. Eli watched in disbelief as they practically strolled around the building, making no real effort to save it. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "That's my livelihood burning." The fire chief barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, please stay back. We got this under control." But they didn't have it under control. They were letting it burn. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Live from Brooks Ranch, where karma seems to have caught up with our local troublemaker." Gordon Pike stood near his car, phone held high, streaming video. His face glowed with reflected flames as he narrated. After weeks of aggressive behavior and baseless accusations against upstanding citizens, it seems Miss Brooks's property has suffered an unfortunate accident. Sources suggest electrical issues may be to blame, though, of course, we'll wait for an official investigation. Eli started toward him, hands clenching, but Calvin caught her arm. "Don't," he whispered. "That's what he wants. More footage of you being aggressive." She forced herself to turn away, focusing instead on checking the horses. They got most out, but 2 were missing. The guilt and grief would come later. For now, she had to stay functional. Through the rest of the night, she documented everything. She took photos, recorded the firefighters' suspicious behavior, and noted exactly when they'd arrived and what they hadn't done. Pike kept filming, kept narrating his poison. Other vehicles arrived, locals drawn by the flames, watching from a distance. Some looked troubled, others smiled. Finally, dawn began breaking over the smoking ruins. The fire had taken almost everything: barn, equipment, feed, records. Eli stood in the ashes, clutching the recovered bag she'd fought for. But when she opened it, her stomach dropped. The files inside were worthless duplicates, old papers. Her lockbox, the one containing her military records, her real evidence, her proof, was gone. She looked at the ruins of her barn. It was a smoldering reminder that paper injunctions couldn't stop men who played with fire, that the law meant nothing when those meant to enforce it looked away, that sometimes justice required more than documents and lawyers. Around her, the ranch was waking. Birds called, horses stamped nervously in the pasture. The sun rose red through smoke-stained air, and Eli Brooks stood in the ashes of her grandfather's barn, feeling something shift inside her. Something hard and cold and certain. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard, highlighting the blackened skeleton of the barn against the sky. Eli and Maya sat on the pickup's tailgate, their hands streaked with ash from salvaging what little they could. Empty coffee cups sat between them, gone cold hours ago. "We document everything," Maya said, her laptop balanced on her knees. "Every call, every threat, every coincidence. They think burning evidence hurts us? We'll build new evidence from the ashes." Eli nodded, but her eyes kept drifting to her phone. The knot in her stomach tightened. Calvin should have checked him by now. Maya's phone buzzed. "It's Granger," she said, putting it on speaker. Attorney Wallace Granger's voice crackled through, strained and hesitant. "Ms. Kincaid, I need to withdraw from the Brooks case." "What?" Maya straightened. "Wallace, we just filed yesterday. There have been complications." His words came faster now. "Nervous threats. My office window was shot out last night. My daughter's preschool received visits from concerned citizens." Eli's jaw clenched. More isolation tactics. "Wallace, we can get protection orders," Maya argued. "File complaints with who?" Granger cut in. "The same sheriff's department that watched that barn burn? The same judges who—" He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But I have a family." The line went dead. "Coward," Maya spat, but Eli saw the fear in her friend's eyes. They both knew Granger wasn't wrong about the risks. Maya's phone buzzed again an hour later. The news hit like another gut punch. The judge had reversed the injunction, citing procedural errors in the filing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. "I'll refile," Maya insisted. Different jurisdiction, different. They'll just block it again, Eli said quietly. This isn't about law anymore. It's about power. She stood, checking her watch. Calvin should have been back with supplies by now. She tried his cell again. Straight to voicemail. A wrong feeling crawled up her spine. I'm going to look for him, she told Maya. Stay here. Watch the cameras. Call if anyone shows up. The drive into town felt longer than usual, each mile adding weight to her dread. The hardware store's parking lot was empty except for Calvin's truck, parked crooked behind the building. The driver's door hung open. That damn news charm swayed from the mirror like a taunt. Eli approached carefully, scanning for threats. Blood darkened the seat fabric. Not much, but enough. Enough to say they had him. Enough to prove they could take whatever they wanted. She found Sheriff Larkin at the station, boots up on his desk, radio murmuring country music. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Calvin Reed, he made a show of checking papers. No reports of any disturbance. Probably just ran off. Lots of drifters do when things get tough. There's blood in his truck, Eli said, voice flat. Maybe he cut himself. Larkin's smile widened. You seem awful worked up, Ms. Brooks. All these accusations, all this anger. Folks might think you're spiraling. Stress can do funny things to a person's mind. Eli's hands trembled. The urge to vault his desk and introduce him to real stress was almost overwhelming. But that's what they wanted. Her losing control, giving them an excuse to lock her up while they erased every trace of their crimes. She forced herself still, remembered sniper breathing. Slow in, slower out. I want to file a missing persons report, she said carefully. Sure thing. Larkin pulled out a form, writing with exaggerated slowness. Though given Mr. Reed's background, might take a while to process. Paperwork, you understand? More delays, more dead ends, more messages that the system would give her no justice. The drive home was a blur. Maya met her at the gate, face grim. Any sign? Eli shook her head. Inside, she laid out her equipment on the kitchen table with mechanical precision. Surveillance cameras, rangefinders, topographical maps marked with sight lines and approach routes. Her hands moved with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this before in other wars. They're following a playbook, she said, voice distant. Isolate the target. Remove supporters, exhaust resources, break resistance step by step until surrender looks like the only option. We're not beaten yet, Maya insisted. I've got calls in a federal. Eli's phone chimed. New message. Unknown number. The video opened on Calvin's face, bruised and swollen. Blood matted his hair. Zip ties cut into his wrists. Dne Ror stood beside him, immaculate in his business casual outfit. Smiling like this was a friendly meeting. Evening, Ms. Brooks, Ror said pleasantly. I believe we can finally dispense with illegal theatrics. You have something I want. I have something you want. He patted Calvin's shoulder, making him flinch. Simple exchange. Text appear below. Sign the land over. Maya swore viciously, but Eli just stared at the screen, at Calvin's battered face, at Ror's smug smile. The last piece clicked into place. They thought they were breaking her. They thought they were winning. They didn't understand what they'd just done. The charred beams of the barn loft creaked softly as Eli settled into position. The familiar weight of her rifle balanced against her shoulder. Smoke still clung to the scorched wood, but the elevation gave her a perfect view of her land and the roads beyond. The night pressed close, heavy with purpose. Below, motion sensors and trip wires created an invisible web across her property. Not to harm, to warn, to track, to control the battlefield. She'd spent the afternoon placing them with the same methodical precision she'd once used in other war zones. The tablet beside her flickered with the video feed of Calvin. She studied it frame by frame, her jaw tight, but her hands steady. The background behind his bound form revealed telling details. A distinctive crack in concrete walls, a partial company logo, the angle of evening shadows. The abandoned River Rock Quarry office just past the county line. Close enough to control, far enough to avoid local witnesses. She wouldn't rush. Rushing got people killed. Instead, Eli touched her phone screen, activating the dead man's server Maya had set up. If she didn't enter a code every 12 hours, Everything would release automatically. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded threats, all carefully documented and packaged for federal investigators. A digital insurance policy. Next came the emails scheduled for dawn. Every company that sponsored Pike's radio show would receive clips of his most vicious lies, his call for violence barely coded enough to stay legal. Let them see what they were really funding. The night deepened. Eli tracked movement at the quarry through her scope. 3 guards at the gate, rotating hourly. 2 more patrolling the perimeter. Trucks coming and going, mostly local muscle playing soldier. Their patterns were sloppy with overconfidence. They didn't expect resistance. They never did. A guard stepped into view, a cigarette glowing as he laughed at something his partner said. The sound carried across the empty quarry. Eli controlled her breathing, just like she'd been trained. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. The crosshairs settled. She squeezed the trigger. The spotlight above the guard's head exploded in a shower of glass and sparks. Darkness slammed down as shouts erupted. Confusion spread like ripples in a pond. Guards scrambled for cover, shooting at shadows while Eli was already moving, ghosting to her next position before they could even guess her direction. This wasn't about killing. It was about control, about leverage, about showing them that their power wasn't absolute. 2 more shots, precise and measured. 2 more lights shattered. The quarry office now sat in complete darkness, while flashlight beams stabbed wildly at nothing. Eli's radio crackled softly. "Maya, monitoring police channels. Sheriff's Department is holding back," she whispered. They're not responding to calls from the quarry. Of course not. They couldn't risk official involvement now. This was beyond their carefully maintained fiction of law and order. Through her scope, Eli watched Roar emerge from the office, his casual confidence finally cracking. He shouted at his men, gesturing angrily at the darkness. They had lost control of their own fortress without taking a single casualty. Her phone vibrated. A text from Roar, "Come alone." Eli allowed herself a small, cold smile as she typed her response. "I'm already here." The message sent, and she watched Roar's face in her scope as he read it. For the first time, real fear flickered across his features. Good. Fear made people sloppy. Fear made them desperate. She settled deeper into her position, checking her ammunition and water supply. The night was still young. More guards were arriving, but they bunched together now, jumping at shadows. Their flashlight beams revealed their positions while she remained invisible in the darkness. Through her scope, she could see Calvin through a window, still bound, but alive. They hadn't hurt him worse. They needed him as a bargaining chip, but they had miscalculated badly. They thought this was about land, about money, about power. They didn't understand that by taking Calvin, they had crossed a line that transformed this from a property dispute into something much more personal. Another guard ventured too close to her position. Eli's finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. Not yet. Let them wear themselves down with fear first. Let them realize how exposed they were, how vulnerable their fortress had become. She checked her watch. Hours until dawn. Hours until her scheduled evidence releases would begin flooding inboxes across the state. Hours for Roar and his men to understand exactly what kind of enemy they had made. Wind whispered through the burned barn beams, carrying the acrid scent of ash and vengeance. Eli remained motionless, patient, her scope never wavering from the quarry office. She had learned patience in places these men couldn't imagine, waiting days for a single perfect shot that could change the course of battles they would never know existed. The radio crackled again. Maya's voice, tense but controlled. "Eli, I've got movement on the back road. 3 more vehicles incoming." "Copy," Eli whispered. "Keep monitoring." She shifted slightly, adjusting her angle to cover the new approach. Let them come. Let them gather. The more they concentrated their forces here, the more vulnerable they became. Every man they brought was another witness, another potential weak point, another person who might break under pressure. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Roar, but she didn't check it. She didn't need to. The time for threats and negotiations was over. Now, there was only the night, the scope, and the slow, inexorable tightening of the trap she had laid. Gravel crunched under Eli's boots as she moved through the scrubland surrounding the quarry. The guards' flashlight beams swept wild patterns across broken concrete and rusted equipment, revealing their panic. A generator hummed somewhere behind the office, powering emergency lights that cast more shadows than illumination. "This is ridiculous," a voice carried from near the main gate. "She's just one woman." "Shut up and keep watching," another guard snapped. "You want to end up like the spotlights?" Eli pressed closer, using their argument as cover. Her rifle was secured across her back now, too unwieldy for close quarters. Instead, her hand gripped the familiar weight of her tactical baton. The metal felt cold against her palm. Through gaps in the fence, she counted 4 guards at the front entrance, 3 more circling the perimeter. Their formation was sloppy, leaving blind spots big enough to drive a truck through. These weren't soldiers, just local thugs playing at power. A security camera hung limp from its mount, disabled by her first shots. No electronic eyes to track her movement now, just men with flashlights and too much fear in their trigger fingers. She paused behind a stack of concrete pipes, controlling her breathing. Inside the office, a shadow moved past a window. Calvin's silhouette, slumped but upright. 2 armed figures flanked him. Beyond them, Roar's voice rose and fell, sharp with frustration. Eli touched her earpiece. "Maya, do you copy?" "Here," Maya whispered. "Federal response team is 20 minutes out. They're moving quiet. No sirens yet." "Copy that." Eli checked her watch. Dead man server armed and ready. "Missed the next check-in. Everything drops." Eli nodded, though Maya couldn't see it. Everything was in position. Now came the part that couldn't be planned, just executed with precision and controlled violence. She ghosted between shadows, using the guards' own flashlight sweeps to time her movement. Their attention was focused outward, expecting an attack from the perimeter. None of them thought to watch the gaps between searchlights. The office's back window was unlatched, sloppy. These men had gotten too used to being feared, too comfortable in their power. Eli eased it open with barely a whisper of sound. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights buzzed. Calvin sat zip-tied to a metal chair. Blood crusted around his nose and mouth, but his eyes were alert, tracking movement, still fighting. 2 guards blocked the door, rifles held carelessly, more interested in their conversation than their prisoner. Eli coiled, muscles tensing. Timing was everything. She couldn't give them a chance to radio for help. She exploded through the window in a shower of glass. Before the first guard could turn, her baton caught him across the throat. He dropped, clutching his neck, unable to even scream. The second guard swung his rifle toward her, but Eli was already inside his reach. Her knee drove up into his solar plexus with a wet crunch. He folded like wet cardboard. Well. Roar's voice dripped contempt as he stepped from the shadows, pistol raised. "The farmer thinks she's a soldier." They circled each other, Eli keeping the desk between them. Roar's smile never reached his eyes. "You know what's funny?" he said. "This whole county belongs to me. Sheriff, judges, commissioners, all bought and paid for. But you just couldn't accept that, could you? Had to play hero." "You talk too much," Eli said softly. She fainted left. Roar's gun tracked the movement and missed her real strike. Her hand locked around his wrist, twisting sharply until bones ground together. The pistol clattered to the floor. Roar snarled, swinging a wild haymaker. Eli slipped inside it and drove him backward into a filing cabinet. The impact rang through the metal. The fight turned brutal and close. Roar had size and reach, but Eli had training and experience. His elbow caught her temple. She answered with a headbutt that broke his nose. Blood sprayed. They grappled, knocked over chairs, slammed into walls. Boots thundered in the hallway, reinforcements coming. Eli drove her knee into Roar's kidney, buying space. He stumbled, spitting curses. Suddenly, brilliant light flooded the quarry. Sirens wailed in perfect synchronization. Federal law enforcement, not local. Maya's dead man server had triggered, sending everything to waiting investigators. The cavalry had arrived. Roar's eyes went wide with real fear. He lunged for the door, but Eli was faster. Her tackle took them both to the ground. She locked his arm behind his back, driving her knee into his spine until handcuffs clicked into place. "You're done," she whispered. Agents in tactical gear swarmed the office, weapons raised. Eli kept Roar pinned until they took control, then scrambled to Calvin. Her hand shook slightly as she cut his bonds. Calvin collapsed against her shoulder, trembling but alive. "Knew you'd come," he mumbled. "Always," she said, holding him steady. Roar thrashed and screamed as agents dragged him toward the door. "This changes nothing," he shouted. "You'll still lose the land anyway. You hear me? You'll lose everything." Pink streaks painted the sky as emergency lights continued to flash across the quarry's rusted equipment. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze, creating boundaries around areas where federal agents worked methodically, documenting everything. Eli sat on the tailgate of an FBI vehicle, a blanket draped over her shoulders, more for protocol than comfort. Her hands were steady as she sipped from a paper cup of water. Two agents in dark jackets approached, notebooks ready. "Ms. Brooks," the female agent said, "I'm Special Agent Teresa Martinez. This is Agent Cooper. We need your statement." Eli nodded, her voice calm and clear as she laid out the sequence of events. She started with the initial raid on her ranch, describing each escalation with precise detail. When she mentioned the evidence backups, Agent Cooper's eyebrows raised. "You maintained copies across multiple secure servers?" "Maya Kincaid helped set that up," Eli explained. "Everything's time-stamped, geotagged, and authenticated. The dead man switch was her idea, too." Martinez made notes. "That's impressively thorough preparation. In the Marines, we call it contingency planning," Eli said. "Always have backup for your backup." A commotion at the quarry entrance drew their attention. Sheriff Larkin's cruiser pulled up, its lights still flashing importantly. He stepped out, adjusting his gun belt with the swagger of a man used to throwing his weight around. Then he saw the federal badges and stumbled to a stop. Agent Cooper held up a tablet. On it played crystal-clear security footage from the gas station, showing Larkin's cruiser parked with a clear view of the initial raid on Eli's ranch. The timestamp matched perfectly. The sheriff's face went ash-gray. "Wade Larkin," Martinez said, "we have some questions about your involvement in this criminal enterprise." Across the quarry, another scene was unfolding. Gordon Pike's morning radio show cut off mid-rant as federal agents entered a studio. The live feed showed him sputtering as sponsors' logos vanished from his backdrop one by one. A news ticker crawled across the bottom. Local radio host named in federal warrant. More vehicles arrived, dark SUVs with federal markings. Agents carried boxes of documents from the county office building. The forged liens were unraveling thread by thread, exposing years of systematic land theft and corruption. Calvin sat in the back of an ambulance holding an ice pack to his jaw while giving his statement. His voice was tired but determined as he detailed his captivity. When he described Roar's threats, his hands shook slightly, but his words never wavered. "Need anything?" Eli asked, approaching once the paramedics finished checking him. "Nah." Calvin managed a small smile. "Just glad it's over." The sound of rotors drew their attention skyward. News helicopters circled like vultures, cameras pointed at the scene below. A reporter tried to approach Eli with a microphone extended, but federal agents intercepted them, directing them to a designated press area. "Ms. Brooks," one reporter called out, "can you comment on the allegations of systemic corruption?" Eli turned away, letting the agents handle the media. She had nothing to say to cameras. The truth would speak for itself through evidence and testimony. Maya's car pulled up, and she emerged carrying a tray of coffee cups and a thick manila envelope. Her usual sharp business attire was wrinkled from an all-night vigil monitoring the evidence servers, but her eyes were bright with victory. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing Eli a cup. "Real coffee, not that break room sludge." They watched together as Roar was led to a prisoner transport vehicle. His expensive shirt was torn and bloodied, his handcuffed wrists held low. All his arrogance had drained away, leaving him looking somehow smaller, diminished. A senior federal agent approached Eli, introducing himself as Deputy Director Roberts. I want to commend your restraint in this situation, Ms. Brooks. You had every opportunity for revenge, but you chose to let justice work instead. Revenge wasn't the point, Eli said quietly. Never was. Your preparation was exceptional, he continued. The evidence trails, the backup servers, the documented pattern of escalation. You built an airtight case while defending yourself within the law. That's not easy to do under pressure. Eli thought of long nights in desert observation posts, waiting for the perfect shot while chaos erupted below. Pressure's familiar territory, sir. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Crime scene technicians photographed the quarry office, marking evidence and taking samples. Eli could see Calvin's blood on the chair where he'd been tied, Roar's on the filing cabinet where she'd driven him. Violence left its marks, but evidence told the true story. Maya approached with the manila envelope, her expression softening. "Got something for you," she said, pulling out a document heavy with official seals. The top read Federal Land Protection Order in bold letters. "It's done," Maya explained. "The ranch is protected now, federal level. No more county games, no more fake liens. That land is yours, locked down tight as Fort Knox." Eli took the document, feeling its weight. Generations of her family had worked that land, fought for it, died defending it. Now, it was truly safe, protected by the highest authority in the land. Morning sunlight spilled across the Brooks Ranch, painting long shadows behind fresh-cut fence posts and newly strung wire. The air carried the sharp scent of sawdust and the steady rhythm of hammers as volunteers worked on the rising frame of the new barn. Eli stood on her porch, coffee warming her hands as she watched the activity unfold. Local veterans, some wearing faded service patches, moved with practiced efficiency. They'd shown up 3 days ago with trucks full of lumber and purpose, refusing payment. "Marines take care of their own," their leader had said simply. The old burn marks were gone, scrubbed away by determined hands. New wood rose clean and strong against the sky, each beam carefully measured and placed. The structure was larger than before, designed with reinforced doors and clear sight lines, suggestions from fellow veterans who understood the need for security without saying it aloud. Calvin directed a group setting support posts, his voice carrying across the yard. The bruises had faded from his face, replaced by the healthy flush of honest work. He caught Eli's eye and grinned, tapping his hard hat in salute. The fear was gone from his movements. He stood straighter now, more confident. "Looking good," Maya said, climbing the porch steps with an armful of papers. She wore jeans instead of her usual suit, ready to pitch in after the legal work was done. "The foundation called this morning. The grant's official. They're announcing it next week." Eli nodded, thinking of the letter that had arrived yesterday from the Department of Defense. It was brief but clear. Her service record was restored, her commendations reinstated, her missions acknowledged with quiet respect. No fanfare, no public ceremony, just truth finally put to paper. Sheriff Larkin's resignation hit the morning news, Maya continued, sorting through documents. He went quietly, cuffs hidden under his jacket, but definitely there. The interim sheriff's already started cleaning house. "And Pike?" Eli asked, though she already knew. "Took the plea deal yesterday, trading names for time." Maya's smile was satisfied. "He'll never touch a microphone again. The station's new management is running retractions every hour." They watched as more trucks arrived, bringing additional volunteers and supplies. The community that had turned its back was slowly turning around, shame and regret driving some to make amends. Eli accepted their help without comment, neither forgiving nor rejecting. Time would tell which changes were genuine. A crew from the Veterans Foundation unloaded lumber near the new barn frame. Their coordinator approached the porch with paperwork, final details for the grant that would help other veterans protect their land. Eli's name would be on it, a shield for others who might face similar fights. "Just need your signature," Maya said, spreading the last documents on the porch railing. Court confirmed the permanent title protection. Triple locked, federal level. No one can touch this land without going through 3 kinds of hell first. Eli's hand was rock steady as she signed. The pen moved smoothly. No hesitation, no tremor. She'd earned this moment with patience and precision, protecting her home without becoming what they wanted to make her. The morning stretched toward noon. Eli walked the property line, inspecting the work. New fence posts stood straight and true, wire pulled tight between them. The racist graffiti was gone, replaced by fresh paint. Even the grass seemed greener, as if the land itself was healing. She paused at the old oak tree, its branches spreading wide over the spot where she'd first unearthed the rifle. The weapon was back in its resting place now, carefully cleaned and oiled before being returned to the earth. It slept there like a guardian, ready but unnecessary, a last resort she hoped never to need again. The sound of laughter drew her attention back to the barn raising. Calvin was showing a group of younger veterans how to properly align roof trusses, his movements confident and natural. He belonged here as much as she did, both of them stronger for having defended it together. A breeze carried the scent of grilling food. Someone had brought lunch for the volunteers. The atmosphere was almost festive, but with an undercurrent of serious purpose. These people understood what it meant to rebuild, to reclaim, to stand your ground without losing yourself. Maya waved from near the construction site, holding up more papers that needed attention. Always more paperwork, but this kind built rather than destroyed. Eli headed back, boots crunching on gravel that no longer hid threats. The ranch felt alive again, humming with honest work and earned peace. She checked her phone. Messages from supporters, updates from federal investigators still unraveling the corruption, notes from other veterans offering help. The isolation was broken. The system that had failed her was being rebuilt, slowly but surely, by people who remembered their oaths. Near sunset, as the volunteers packed up for the day, Eli walked the fence line one more time. Her fingers trailed along the fresh wood, feeling its strength. The air was clean, free of smoke and fear. Each post marked a boundary that would be respected. Each gate secured by more than just locks, by law, by witness, by a community finally awakened. She reached the main gate and paused. The new sign gleamed. Brooks Ranch, established 1889. Below it, smaller but clear, protected land. Federal oversight. She looked out over the fields stretching toward the horizon. Pastures where horses would soon graze again. Earth that had soaked up generations of her family's sweat and dreams. The land rolled away under the golden evening light. Finally, completely, irrevocably hers. Home again. Not just by deed, but by right, by fight, by truth revealed, and justice served. Golden hour painted the Brooks Ranch in warm amber, the new house standing proud against the darkening sky. Eli stood on her freshly built porch, letting the coffee mug warm her hands as she watched shadows lengthen across the pasture. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of hay and fresh-cut lumber mixing with the rich aroma of her drink. A car crunched up the gravel drive. Unfamiliar rental tags, press credentials visible on the dashboard. Eli had been expecting this. News traveled fast in small towns, especially when federal agents were involved. The reporter stepped out, notepad already in hand, wearing city shoes that weren't made for ranch dirt. Ms. Brooks, Janet Martinez from the Post. Could I get your comment on the recent developments? The community would like to hear your side of the story. The reporter's tone was professional, almost sympathetic, but Eli recognized the hunger for drama beneath the surface. Eli took another sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. She thought of all the headlines they could spin: veteran triumphs over corruption or race injustice in rural America. But those weren't her stories to sell. The truth lived in the rebuilt barn, the mended fences, the horses grazing peacefully in the distance. No comment, Eli said finally, her voice firm but not unkind. The court records speak for themselves. The reporter opened her mouth to push further, but something in Eli's steady gaze made her pause. After a moment, she nodded, tucking her notepad away. As the rental car disappeared down the drive, Eli walked to her truck, pulling out a simple sign she'd had made in town. The metal was cool and solid in her hands as she mounted it by the front gate. Private property. Trespassers prosecuted. No elaborate warnings, no threats, just clear boundaries backed by law. The sign caught the last rays of sunlight, letters stark against the clean white background. Evening wind rippled through the tall grass, making patterns like waves across the pasture. In the distance, her horses moved with lazy grace, settling in for the night. Their presence filled a void that had ached during the worst days when the barn lay in ashes and threat hung heavy in the air. Standing there, Eli let memory surface. Roar's sneering face, Larkin's dismissive shrug, Pike's poisonous broadcasts, the shove that had bruised her shoulder, the slurs carved into wood. The night they'd beaten Calvin and laughed. Each moment rose like bitter smoke and dissipated in the clean evening air. She didn't need to hold them anymore. Justice hadn't come as mercy or forgiveness. It had come as consequence, natural as gravity, inevitable as dawn. She hadn't needed to burn their world down. Truth had done that work, built on evidence, patience, and pressure. The lies had collapsed under their own weight, once exposed to light. Her phone buzzed. Maya's text lit up the screen. It's over. Simple words that carried the weight of months of legal work, countless documents, recorded testimonies, and carefully preserved evidence. Eli's lips curved in a small, real smile, not of triumph, but of peace finally earned. The porch boards creaked softly under her boots as she turned toward the house. Through the window, she could see Calvin in the kitchen, probably cooking enough for 3, as usual. He'd started doing that after they rebuilt, making extra food, leaving lights on longer, small gestures that said someone else was there, that the ranch had become home to more than just memories. Inside, the new house smelled of fresh wood and coffee. Everything was simple, functional, built to last. No fancy fixtures or decorative touches, just honest materials put together with care. The contractors had offered upgrades, but Eli had kept to the basics. Beauty was in strength, in things that served their purpose without pretense. She locked the door with a solid click, more habit than fear now. The porch light switched off, leaving the ranch to settle into natural darkness. Through the windows, she watched night claim the land in gentle stages. First the valleys, then the fence lines, finally the hilltops. Stars emerged one by one, filling the sky with ancient light. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It held the sound of horses shifting in their stalls, wind in the grass, the occasional distant call of a night bird. The ranch breathed with its own rhythm, not nervous or watchful, but calm, present, alive. Eli moved through her evening routine, checking cameras more from habit than necessity, walking the house's perimeter, making sure Calvin had actually gone home instead of falling asleep on the couch again. The motions were familiar, but lighter now, free from the weight of constant vigilance. In the distance, coyotes called to each other, their voices carrying clear across the open land. Time was when such sounds made her reach for weapons, scanning for threats in every shadow. Now she just listened, recognizing them as part of the night's natural chorus. The ranch held its boundaries, secure in its own right to exist. Upstairs in her new bedroom, Eli stood at the window. The stars had fully emerged, scattered like brilliant dust across the dark sky. Below, the land stretched out, solid and unchanging. Fences traced property lines that would hold, protected by more than just wire and wood. Now the night passed peacefully, as nights would continue to pass, not because the world had become kinder, but because she had made her peace of it strong enough to endure.